Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin, non-tradicath, and I'm the non-traditional Catholic, maybe ex-Catholic. I guess it depends on what definition of the word you use. But I've long considered the Catholic faith to be something that's actually fairly reasonable if you make a couple baseline assumptions that I just don't make any longer. One of those assumptions is in objective morality. I think that the argument from morality makes a lot of sense if you can prove that objective morality exists. So if objective morality exists, then there must be some measure by which we measure it. And if you just want to call whatever that thing is God, okay, cool, fine. I don't think that objective morality exists though. And I'm pretty sure that pretty much every practicing Catholic makes that assumption that objective morality exists. So I called Catholic Answers yesterday to see what they would have to say about me asking them, I guess, first, does the church mandate that Catholics believe in objective morality? And then two, why? I'm familiar with the arguments from appeals to intuition and appeals to popularity, but those aren't good arguments, as I'm sure we all agree. And I've never really gotten a satisfactory answer from a Catholic about objective morality. So I called Jimmy Akin yesterday evening, and I thought in this video I would just quickly respond to Jimmy and chat a little bit about objective morality. So let's switch over, and I'll play the clip.
Phone, so I'll just continue on. Kevin in Lexington, Kentucky, watching on YouTube. Kevin, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy and Cy.
Hi, Kevin.
The only arguments for...
And I'm going to interrupt just to say, don't you hate the sound of your voice when you hear it in a recording? And I know, I do YouTube, so it's kind of ironic, but...
For objective morality that I'm familiar with are appeals to intuition and appeals to popularity. I think that the church necessitates her members to believe in objective morality. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not familiar with any arguments to do so, besides intuition and popularity. So, does the church necessitate belief in objective morality? And if so, how would a Catholic go about arguing for it?
So, I set Jimmy up with the, hey, I'm familiar with the arguments from intuition and the arguments from popularity. I don't think, well, I didn't say that I don't find them compelling, but I think it's implied that I don't find them compelling. So I'm asking Jimmy, what other reasons might a Catholic have to suggest that objective morality exists? And then I also start with, but actually, does the church obligate her members to think that objective morality exists? And Jimmy starts off that answer very quickly just by saying yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin. The church does believe in objective morality.
Okay, so that essentially solves the first part of my question. Does the church obligate her members to believe in objective morality? Yes, the church does. Now, I don't have any kind of encyclical pulled up or anything like that, but Jimmy and I agree there. But let Jimmy kind of talk about why he thinks that objective morality exists, and then also why I disagree with Jimmy. But then just a note too, I'm a big Jimmy Akin fan. I think he's super cool, and I put him on the spot. That is kind of Catholic Answers. They're on the spot. This Thursday call was like a open forum. So anybody could call about anything. So Jimmy didn't have time to prepare or anything. So I don't think that the answer that he gives here is necessarily indicative of his best work if he had time to prepare or something. So that being said, I'm going to let Jimmy respond and then I'm going to respond.
And there are different bases for it that one could argue for it on. There is within the Catholic Church a rich natural law tradition, and the Church argues that God built certain principles into human nature. That's the...
Okay, I'm going to stop him right there and then kind of talk about my first point. Jimmy winds up giving me a nice 5-minute response, which is super nice. But I'm not going to play the whole thing. But right off the bat, you can see that Jimmy starts with natural law. He doesn't mention the word teleology, but I'm going to talk a little bit about teleology because Jimmy essentially he motions towards teleology. So Jimmy talks about natural law. Natural law the way that like Aristotle and Thomas would describe it, has to do with goodness, not morality. They're different. The reason why I say that they're different is because a hammer that hammers things poorly is a bad hammer, according to natural law. A hammer that hammers things well is a good hammer. It's not an immoral or a moral hammer. It's just good or bad. That's not the same thing as being moral or immoral. Goodness and badness is not the same thing as moral and immoral, and I think that there's a little bit of an equivocation going on here. I will switch back to Jimmy now and let him continue, but I just want to state that first, is that I think Jimmy's gut response is to go to natural law, and I feel like that's not actually a satisfactory way to discuss morality.
The law that we're concerned about in morality, it's not laws of nature like gravity or electromagnetism. It's the law of human nature, that humans are built in such a way that it is moral and reasonable for them to do certain things but not others.
Okay, so Jimmy says that it is like we're just built in such a way where it's moral and immoral for us to do certain things, and to me that's just an appeal to intuition, like I said earlier. I don't understand any other way that Jimmy could be meaning like we are just built that way. I mean, that's not evidently the case. So you might just be saying that's intuitively the case. And if you are, fine, but that's just an argument from intuition, like I said previously. And this is what I mean when I say that Jimmy was talking about teleology. Humans are built in such a way that we do certain things. So sure, but most Catholics would not say that it's immoral to walk on your hands, like when an acrobat walks on their hands. And your hands are not built for walking, but we can do that anyway. So that's like a teleological counterexample, I suppose. So I think that Jimmy was kind of getting at teleology, like, oh, humans are built to do certain things, and it's good for us to do the things that we're built for, and it's bad for us to do the things that we're not built for. We're not built for murdering babies, but we are built for giving money to the poor, or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what Jimmy means, but this whole gesture at natural law, I think, was probably like an equivocation with goodness and badness. And again, Jimmy was on the spot, so I don't think that this is necessarily Jimmy's like, like this is his off-the-cuff response. So I'm not necessarily going to hold Jimmy to this, but I don't think that this is the best answer that one could possibly give. And I would love to talk to Jimmy about this more sometime, like over the phone. I mean, that'd be incredible, because I'm sure he'd be able to give a much better answer than the kind of answer that he is put on the spot providing like immediately on Catholic Answers. So let me switch back and let him talk more.
Like it's reasonable and moral to give medicine to the sick. It is not reasonable or moral to torture small babies for fun. That's out of accord with the proper
like what is ordinary
to do some
ordinary for humans to do. And again, I think that's just kind of like teleology, I guess, but it's also kind of just an appeal to intuition. He winds up talking about things being in accord with human nature, but again, how do we know what is in accord with human nature? This seems like an appeal to intuition. And then Jimmy moves into arguments for people who don't believe in natural law, and he talks about precisely what I talk about. So let him speak a little bit more.
Have different intuitions about what specific things are moral or immoral, but we all have this intuition that that some things can be done and some things must not be done. And that's an intuition that is so widespread in humanity that it's effectively, I mean, not effectively, it is a human universal, meaning an intuition.
Okay, I want to talk about this for a moment. So Jimmy admits, he's like, yeah, so if you don't believe in natural law because you're not a theist, if you're an atheist and I need to convince you about objective morality, I'm going to use an argument from intuition. But it's not just an argument from intuition. It's a human universal that torturing babies for fun is wrong. I'm going to push back on Jimmy here. It's still just an argument from intuition. Yeah, it's a really strong intuition, but very strong intuitions have been wrong in the past. It was a super strong intuition that the earth was flat. This was the predominant theory for a very long time. So you could have made a argument from intuition that the earth was flat and you would have been wrong. even though it was a universally held intuition, before the time of the ancient Greeks, nobody knew that the earth was round. And the ancient Greeks figured it out by, doing math with the stars and stuff like that. Which is awesome. But even then it wasn't widespread or anything. So even in the time of the ancient Greeks, the most widespread intuition, the human universal, quote unquote, would have been that the earth is flat. So I'm not convinced by appeals to intuition, no matter how universal they might seem. Intuitions can be wrong. Additionally, I feel like it's weird to appeal to the objectivity based on intuition, because you, Jimmy, and most Catholics would argue that it's objectively wrong for people to engage in like non-procreative sex. That is not intuitive, and most people across most cultures have not held that view. That's a really counterintuitive view. Further, Catholics would say that it's immoral to eat meat on at least Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. Now, I was raised traddy, so I grew up not eating meat on any Friday in the whole year. But Catholics would say that it is immoral to eat meat on Good Friday and Ash Wednesday. That's not intuitive at all. So I don't think that the appeal to intuition works. Jimmy might want to argue that there's a couple baseline intuitions that seem super intuitive, and I will agree that I think that it is a human universal that to torture babies is wrong. But I think when people say wrong, they're not talking about some objective morality. I think that what they're saying is torturing babies is not preferred. It's not a desired behavior. So, and speaking of torturing babies, you can see my one cat torturing my other cat in the corner. But anyway, I just disagree with Jimmy there. And I'm going to let him keep talking.
Intuition that is found in all cultures. Now, like I said, there can be individuals who don't have this intuition, like sociopaths, but in every culture in human history all over the world,
fast forward
to it. And so you're simply living in accord with human nature if you honor that intuition and say, yeah, this is the way things are. It may not be.
Yeah, and then Jimmy adds this weird note about this is the way things are. It's just wrong to kill babies for fun. It just is. It's like a brute moral fact. And again, my response is this is, you're asserting it, but I didn't ask for assertions. I asked for how do we know? How do we argue for this? And again, it just seems like Jimmy's saying, well, it just is. It's just the truth. It's just a fact. And I'm saying, how? That's what I'm looking for. So, Jimmy goes on to talk about empiricism in a second.
An empirical thing that I can demonstrate with a laboratory test, like I can't measure goodness in a graduated cylinder or, weigh a certain amount of evil in a scale. But the universality of this intuition in human history strongly suggests that it is a non-empirical reality.
So Jimmy says that this strong intuition should give us good reason to think that this is a non-empirical reality. So I certainly agree that morality is not an empirical thing, right? So I'm not literally an empiricist, but I did go to engineering school, so I have a strong bias towards the empirical. I think that the vast majority of our justified true beliefs come from empirical knowledge. I really think that the only things that we can know non-empirically are things that are derivations of the logical laws, so math. And that's kind of the only exception that I make. I'm just not convinced of anything else that's non-empirical besides the logical laws and then the things that derive from them, like math. But morality is not a derivation from the logical laws, and it's non-empirical. And I don't find good reason to think that it exists, not in the same way that Catholics do. I think I'm fine with Sam Harris level morality, but I would call that subjective morality, not objective. So the next thing that Jimmy goes on to talk about is how everybody lives like it's true, even if you call yourself a moral anti-realist. This is perhaps the thing that I disagreed with the most, so I'm going to switch back over to Jimmy and let him explain more.
So that's kind of a general sketch. I'm trying to think, was there something else I meant to mention? People who will entertain the idea that objective morality may not exist inevitably fall back into it. It's not possible for a normal person who's not a sociopath to live their life as if there is no morality, even if.
I'm going to stop him there because this is perhaps the part that I take the most objection to. So Jimmy says everybody lives like it's true, even if you're somebody who's a moral anti-realist. So Jimmy, this strikes me like you are claiming that moral anti-realists can't have morally agnostic reasons to not do a lot of the same things that you don't do. So the only reason not to murder babies is because it is objectively wrong to murder babies for fun. Well, this just strikes me as not true at all. I might have non-objective moral reasons for not wanting to murder babies for fun. I might think that I want to avoid suffering. Torturing babies for fun increases suffering. Therefore, I'm not going to do it. There's a reason that has nothing to do with morality. Now, maybe you want to call that subjective morality because you think that all morality really has to do with suffering. Fine. That's, Sam Harris. Okay, but regardless, that's not objective morality. People can have non-moral reasons to not want to do the things that you don't want to do, and you claim that your reasons are moral. That has nothing to do with... So somebody who doesn't want to torture babies for fun is not necessarily an objective moral realist, Jimmy. And I don't think it's fair for you to claim that somebody who's a moral anti-realist is living as if they are a moral realist when they're not torturing babies. I think that's super strange. If Jimmy would claim that someone disagreeing with Jimmy's moral claims is proof that they really do live like moral anti-realists, then I think that things like slavery and sexual ethics are really good examples, counterexamples. So Jimmy Akin's sexual ethics are in line with the Catholic Church, which are very different than the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans think that gay marriage should be legal, gay sex should be legal, all that good stuff. It seems to me like Jimmy Akin is saying that if we all lived like morality was objective, then we would all think that... What? I don't know. I mean, I guess we just don't think that it's objectively wrong? I'm not sure. Maybe I need to think about that part more, but I think that people can have subjective reasons for something that you think that you have an objective reason for, so you can wind up at the same conclusion. And one person can say, I got there subjectively, and you can say that you got there objectively, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I take strong disagreement to your claim that that everyone acts as if morality is objective. I don't think that's right. I'm going to let Jimmy finish, and then I'm going to wrap up the video.
They will say things like at various moments, I don't think there's objective morality. They end up acting like there is. And you can think in your own case about, are there things that I would regard as just wrong? Or even if they're not at the moment, do I end up slipping back into the intuition that some things are just wrong? And you could, think about issues that you might find objectionable, like racism or sexism or ageism or torturing babies for fun.
And I am going to cut off Jimmy there just to say, I actually don't think that anything is just wrong, because that would imply some existence of objective morality. And I don't think that. I think that some things just increase overall suffering. And if you think that it's not preferred to increase suffering, then you ought to avoid doing those things. Thumbs up. I'm fine with that. But I don't think that it's plain old just wrong to do anything, in the sense that I think that like there's this moral code, like an objective moral code that you're breaking. I don't think that any such objective morality exists. And yeah, maybe that is counterintuitive for some people, but it's not counterintuitive for me. And I'm not a sociopath either. I don't think anyway. It's just, I don't know, maybe I'm more empirically minded than most, I suppose. But it's not intuitive to me that some objective moral system exists. And I think that this is evidently the case when people actually spend a lot of time thinking about it, because philosophers seem to be much less certain about the existence of objective morality than your average Catholic, or your average believer in objective morality, I should say. So I think that I'll end there. Jimmy, I am a big fan of yours, and I am 100% positive that if you and I had a 5-minute conversation, instead of a 5-minute, I'm going to put you on the spot, and then, you know, you're going to do your best to respond in as short a time as possible, I'm sure that the conversation would be different. But I think it would be super cool if, like, you and I ever got to hash out our disagreements sometime. So, I'll continue calling Catholic Answers, and I'll continue, you know, just posing my questions real quick. But that's not a real conversation. I love a real conversation with Jimmy Akin. Maybe one day. But until that day, I've been your host, Kevin Non-Tradicath, the non-traditional Catholic, maybe ex-Catholic. And until next time.